In the bustling streets of Nairobi, where dreams clashed with reality, Susan first met Kevin. He was everything she had ever prayed for. Tall, dark, and handsome, with a smile that could sell toothpaste. But more importantly, he seemed to have his life together. "You'll never have to worry about anything," Kevin had said confidently, leaning back in his leather car seat, a gleaming black Mercedes parked outside a fancy restaurant in Westlands. He spoke of his businesses, his properties, and his ambitions. Susan's heart fluttered. If a man can dream this big, she thought, who am I to stop him? Their relationship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners, surprise gifts, and weekend getaways to Diani. Kevin painted a vivid picture of their future: a mansion in Karen, 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and family vacations abroad. He even hinted at buying her parents a new car. Susan's friends envied her, and she basked in the glow of it all. Life felt like a Kenyan rom-com. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming, tiny, almost invisible. It started with odd excuses. Kevin's phone would mysteriously die during their dates. When Susan asked to visit his supposed office, he always had a reason to postpone. "You know how stressful running multiple businesses can be," he'd say, rubbing his temples dramatically. And Susan, blinded by love, nodded sympathetically. By the time they got married in a lavish ceremony at a 5-star hotel, Susan was convinced she'd won the lottery of life. Little did she know she'd soon discover she'd been handed a counterfeit ticket. The first major red flag came 2 months into their marriage. Susan, now adjusting to her new role as Mrs. Mwangi, had settled into the rhythm of married life. Kevin's world of high-stakes business often left him busy, but she felt secure in the knowledge that her husband was working hard to build their future. One sunny afternoon, Susan decided to surprise Kevin by visiting his office. She had prepared his favorite meal, chapati and beef stew, arranged neatly in a thermal carrier. With her heart racing in anticipation, she arrived at the address he'd given her, imagining the moment he'd look up from his desk, stunned and touched by her thoughtfulness. But the building she stood before wasn't the glass-walled tech hub Kevin had described. Instead, it was a run-down structure with peeling paint and a broken sign that read, "Cyber Connect." The hum of outdated computers and the chatter of teenagers playing video games greeted her as she stepped inside. "Excuse me," she asked the young man at the counter, gripping the lunchbox tightly. "Is Kevin Mwangi around?" The man's blank stare sent chills down her spine. "Who?" he asked, eyebrows raised. Susan's chest tightened. "Kevin, the owner of this business?" The man let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Hapa? Here?" "Madam, the owner is Mama Brian, and she's at the market. Maybe you're looking for the wrong place." Her ears buzzed as her world tilted. The smell of sweat and dust from the room became suffocating. She mumbled an apology and hurried out, her mind racing. That evening, Kevin returned home to find her waiting, arms crossed and the untouched lunchbox sitting on the coffee table. "How was your day?" he asked, loosening his tie, his usual charming smile on display. "I went to your office," Susan said, cutting straight to the point. Kevin froze mid-step. His confident demeanor wavered, but only for a split second. "Oh, babe, you should have told me. I wasn't there today." "I know," Susan replied, her voice steady but cold. "Because it's not your office. It's a cyber cafe owned by someone called Mama Brian. Care to explain?" Kevin stammered, pacing the living room. "Babe, babe, babe," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's one of the businesses I've outsourced. You know I can't be everywhere at once." His dramatic tone and flustered gestures could have earned him a standing ovation. It sounded shaky, but Kevin had always been a master at dodging questions. Against her better judgment, Susan let it slide, convincing herself that perhaps there was some truth in his words. But then came the landlord. Thanks for following the story up to this point. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. One morning, as Susan prepared breakfast, an elderly man knocked at the door holding a receipt book. "Mrs. Mwangi," he said, shifting awkwardly, "I'm here to collect rent." Susan frowned, confused. "Rent? But we own this apartment." The landlord's booming laughter echoed through the hallway. "Own? Madam, I've been renting this place to Kevin for 3 years. If you don't believe me, here are the records." He flipped open his receipt book, showing months of unpaid balances. A sinking feeling took over as reality crashed down on her. That was the moment everything unraveled. Piece by piece, the facade Kevin had built began to crumble. The gleaming black Mercedes he always drove, borrowed from a friend who worked in car rentals, the lavish wedding, bankrolled by an uncle who had been duped into believing Kevin was a rising business mogul. Even their weekend getaways to Diani had been paid for with credit cards that Susan didn't know existed. The love story that had felt like a Kenyan rom-com had turned into a tragic comedy. Everything Kevin had told her, his businesses, his wealth, his ambitions, was a carefully curated lie. Staring at the man she thought she knew, Susan realized the depth of his deception. She wasn't just humiliated, she was heartbroken. Susan was furious, humiliated, and heartbroken. She moved back to her parents' house in Embakasi, ignoring Kevin's endless calls and apologies. He showed up one evening, kneeling outside the gate as neighbors peeked through their windows. "Susan, I messed up," he cried, "but I swear I'll make it right. Give me a chance to prove myself." Her father chased him away with a sleeper, but Susan's heart wavered. Despite everything, she loved him. Kevin disappeared for 6 months. Susan focused on rebuilding her life, enrolling in a catering course and starting a small baking business. Just as she began to find her footing, Kevin resurfaced. This time, he wasn't driving a Mercedes or wearing designer suits. He arrived on a boda, carrying a small briefcase. "I got a real job," he said, showing her his appointment letter from a logistics firm. "I'm starting over, for real this time." Susan didn't believe him immediately. It took months of consistent effort. Kevin showing up, paying bills, and even helping her deliver cakes to clients before she let her guard down. Slowly, they rebuilt their relationship. Kevin's charm was no longer built on illusions, but on genuine effort. And Susan's dreams of a happy life didn't vanish. They simply shifted to a new, more honest foundation. In the end, the story wasn't about a perfect man saving a woman or a fairy tale romance. It was about two flawed people learning, growing, and choosing to fight for love despite everything. And Susan, she finally got her happy ending. Not the one she'd imagined, but one she'd built herself. If you enjoyed this story and would like more of such life stories, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Cheers. Have a good one.